Hey everybody, this is Bobby on my YouTube page Everywhere West, and it's a beautiful evening, April 11th, 2012, and in this video we're going to take a brief look at my train layout, my O-scale model train layout. I haven't shown you guys my train layout in quite a while, so quite a few things have changed, so we're going to take a look at the layout and see what it has and run a few trains. And we'll start by giving you a brief tour of the layout. The town, which I have named Rolling Acres, kind of dominates the middle portion of the layout here. We have the Union Station, the trains stop at here, and let's just follow the tracks around the layout. The outer loop, which we have right here, that is the BNSF. The inner loop right here is the Norfolk Southern. So let's follow the BNSF route first. From the main grade crossing here, goes around the edge, the perimeter of the layout, under the highway bridge and the billboard, all the way over on the western edge of my room. Then it kind of gets interesting here. There's a interchange track in the Norfolk Southern, and then the BNSF track goes through a tunnel into my closet. Goes through the closet and then comes out this side, the eastern tunnel portal, and then comes over this pretty nifty lifting bridge. Now this is put in so I can get to my closet, and it actually does lift up. From there, the BNSF track comes around, goes through a short little S-curve, past the grain elevator spur, and back to the main grade crossing. Norfolk Southern Loop, starting here, goes to the south. There's a branch spur track there that goes to the supermarket where food-related freight cars are set out. And the Norfolk Southern track follows the BNSF pretty much the same way through the main tables, under the highway bridge, and then there's a switch track going into the fairly large Norfolk Southern train yard. The yard is 3 sidings, along with another little stub-ended siding there in front of the switch tower. And that's where my freight cars are stored. It's usually packed to the gills, but right now there's only a few freight cars and a locomotive in it. It's also where I store a locomotive that usually does the switching for the Norfolk Southern track. So past the switch there, the Norfolk Southern main line continues along the BNSF, and then it curves around on the main tables. It doesn't go through the tunnel like the BNSF does. It just curves around here on the main tables. And there's the other end of the interchange track, which connects up to the BNSF main. Goes through another grade crossing here, curves back around, and back to the main grade crossing by Union Station. And let's talk a little bit about the spurs on my train layout. This first branch is what I just talked about a few minutes ago on the Norfolk Southern. This is a spur going to the little supermarket that I have there on the edge of the tracks. All the food-related box cars, like refrigerated box cars carrying packaged food, liquid sugar, whatever cars are related to food, go in this siding, and they are unloaded, and the food is distributed to the supermarket and, of course, to people who live in the town. Another spur that's on my layout is serving this grain elevator off of the BNSF main line, which branches off there by Union Station. I have quite a few covered hopper cars that are fairly suitable for hauling grain. I have several standard full O-scale freight cars that are grain hoppers, as well as one O27 car, so those go into this siding. Probably the most exciting part of my layout as far as switching goes is the Norfolk Southern train yard. The train yard, like I said earlier, is 3 main sidings. They're fairly long, and this thing is full up. You could get anywhere between 10 to 12 cars in these sidings, depending on whether they're the shorter non-scale traditional cars like you see here, or the longer scale freight cars like are on the BNSF train right now. You can't fit as many of those in the yard, but still can fit quite a few in. And this third siding here, which I suppose is the main siding, that I actually have isolated off, so you can bring an engine in there and shut the power off, and the engine can just sit there while you're running a train on the main line. Now, in addition to the 3 main sidings in the Norfolk Southern yard, there's also this other track that comes around here and ends there at the bumper right there. I don't use that track as much, but when the yard gets really full, you can put a few cars in there and get a little more capacity out of the yard. The other spur track on my layout is the interchange track connecting the BNSF main line to the Norfolk Southern main. Now, when I was designing my layout, I always wanted to make sure that I would have a connector track of some sort to connect the two lines together. I didn't want two isolated ovals. I wanted it to be a train could go through the entire layout without ever being lifted off the track. So the solution was this interchange track, which literally connects the BNSF mainline loop to the Norfolk Southern loop. Now, of course, to be able to run two trains at the same time, you have to isolate the two tracks. So in the middle here, there's an isolated block section. So you can only have one train running at a time if you're running a train across the interchange track. You can't have one train running on one loop and then trying to switch another train onto the other line. That causes problems. But if you're running one train, you can switch from one track to the other. And then you can run two trains at the same time on each different loop. You can only run one train on each loop at the same time. And I'll talk briefly about a few of the things that I've recently completed on this layout. Some of the things that I'm sure you've probably never seen before on my train layout from my past YouTube videos. Probably the biggest thing I've recently completed is this highway hill on the southern portion of my layout. The road goes up the hill and then over the train tracks on a bridge. And I've had this kind of set up for about a year, but I just recently completed it. The hill is made of cardboard strips glued together in kind of a web, and I have some other cardboard pieces under there to kind of give the road some strength so it doesn't flop over. And then I layered the cardboard with plaster cloth, and once it hardened, I put some textures on there as well. The bridge is made out of mostly cardboard with some wood supports and some other little details like some signs and stuff. Now, another thing I've recently completed is another hill next to the big hill, and this is actually the hill that I completed first, kind of as a test to see how well I could do the scenery. And it turned out pretty well for my first try, and this hill was completely inspired by this billboard that I also built out of wood. There are several different designs that I can put on this billboard, and I actually made the billboard so that it lights up. We've got a little strip of LED lights in the back of the billboard there, so that at night the billboard actually lights up. And it's a pretty neat addition to the side of the highway here. It's a really neat touch. Another view of the highway bridge there, and from this angle you can really see just how steep that downhill the highway really is. And if we get closer, we can actually see that I have a few road signs here on the hill as well. I got the graphics from several sites on the internet and I printed them off, sized them down, and put them on these little paper posts that I built and cut them out and glued them to the hill. And then I actually had those on the hill when I textured it, and so you can't see the little flaps that I had that I glued them down to. So it looks like the signs are just right into the hillside, which makes it look really realistic. Another one of the things that I've changed lately, which you probably haven't seen in my past videos, is that I've actually changed the layout of the town. Now before, my town was over on this side of the layout and the train yard was over here. And when I thought up my newer track plan with the newer sidings like the grain spur and the grocery store spur, I decided to flip things around, and it actually turned out a lot better. The town is now in the main portion of the layout, and people walk into the room, they see the town instead of the train yard, and the train yard is kind of in the background, which is kind of a little more realistic. That's how it is in most cities. The train yard is kind of behind everything else. Another new addition to my layout are the traffic lights, which I bought at the same time I bought my textures and my grocery store for finishing the layout on the other side that we just looked at. The traffic lights are MTH Rail King. They actually work, they light up, and when you wire them together, they actually do a traffic light sequence, just like real traffic lights. There's a complete overview of the town Rolling Acres, and Rolling Acres is supposed to be a town in Iowa, and the name Rolling Acres, I actually got that from the name of a mall in Akron, Ohio, which is now closed, that I've watched videos on YouTube about and become really fascinated in the demise of the mall and the story of that mall. And so I decided to name my town and my layout Rolling Acres. And if you look at one of the road signs on the layout, this one right here, there's actually a hidden message in that sign that if you know any of the history of Rolling Acres Mall, you will know what those numbers mean and what that signifies as far as the history of that mall. So that's actually how I numbered my roads on my layout, was that sign, and I just kind of adapted the different routes on the different roads on my layout from that sign. So Highway 31 is the main road that goes through town. 8 shares the northern leg of 31, and 10 shares the southern leg of 31, and 10 also branches off here and goes across the train tracks. So the town of Rolling Acres is comprised of a lot of different buildings. The vast majority of them are Plasticville, which I have acquired since I started in O-gauge trains back in 2002. It's been almost 10 years now. The Plasticville buildings on the layout consist of the apartment building, which is right there, the town hall, Union Station, the cathedral, the hospital, and the bank, and the two-story house, and then over there is the water tower. Those are all Plasticville buildings. I also have a few MTH Rail King buildings on my layout. This is my newest one that I have acquired and is one of my favorites. This is a Palace Pizza Parlor. It is a really cool building, and it has several tables with umbrellas and a few figures which I actually added to it, as well as a parking lot which I also built for the restaurant. That's one of my favorite MTH buildings. The other two are over here on the other side of the layout. Probably the most dominating downtown building that I have is the MTH Electric Train Store, which is one of MTH's many three-story downtown buildings. The building lights up, and it also has a blinking sign in the window, but mine is currently not working, but the building does light up, and that's another one of my MTH Rail King buildings on my layout. The other one, way back there in the yard, and it's perfect for my Norfolk Southern train yard, except it's Union Pacific. But it is the Union Pacific Switch Tower, which I really like that. It is supposed to be from the Union Pacific's Hobart Freight Yard, and that is just the perfect building, the perfect accessory for a train yard. So it has its perfect spot right there in front of that one little track there on the edge of my Norfolk Southern train yard. So those are the MTH Rail King buildings that I have on my layout. Right here as the road comes off the hill, we have a couple of Lionel and K-Line buildings and other structures. This is an old Lionel water tower that was actually my uncle's originally for his train set, his American Flyer train set. And the light at the top actually blinks after a while, so it's a really neat accessory to have at night with a blinking light. And of course, all Midwestern towns, especially Iowa towns like Rolling Acres, they need a water tower. So that's a perfect accessory, a perfect structure for any small Midwestern town. Now, the other Lionel building I have on my layout, which is actually a K-Line by Lionel building, is the small little supermarket kit, which is a very easy kit to put together, and that is my most recent building that I have acquired. And it is a perfect size for the little footprint there in between the hill and the grocery store spur. Another structure on my layout is the giant grain elevator on my BNSF grain elevator spur. My dad built that for me for Christmas 2010, and that is a really neat structure on my layout as well. Another Plasticville structure that I forgot to mention is the farm, barn, and silo, as well as the windmill, which isn't actually a Plasticville item. I actually got that from Menards, but I always have it with the barn, as well as a tree, which is made by Woodland Scenics, and various cows and pigs along the tracks. And last but not least, in Rolling Acres, we have one of the other buildings that kind of dominates the scene when you come into and see the layout. This is a light-up animated Menards store, which is released by Menards exclusively, of course, during Christmas 2011. And this accessory, I don't quite remember who made it, but it was made exclusively for Menards. It lights up. There's animated shoppers that go around in a circle in and out of the store. And yes, it also includes the world-famous Menards jingle, "You save big money when you shop Menards." And that plays in an infinite loop, but thank goodness it has volume control, so you can turn it down when you don't want to hear it. And I expect you wouldn't want to hear it for very long. So I normally have it completely off on my layout, but you can turn it up, and it is kind of cool to have it. The Menards also has a little sign which also lights up. That actually came off of a Menards O-scale flat car that they put out, and it was actually a load on the flat car. But I disassembled the sign and then put it together so I could have a sign for my Menards, and it looks just like the highway signs you see at Menards in real life. And some of my favorite little accessories are the signs that I make myself for my layout. Like I said earlier, I find little graphics of actual road signs on the internet, and I size them down and print them off. And I have these little signposts that I made for them and just tape them to the signposts and glue them to the layout. They really add a nice touch of realism to the layout, make it look like almost a sized down version of the real thing. One of my favorite signs on the layout that I made myself is this sized down little billboard on my layout from the actual Rolling Acres Mall in Akron, Ohio. It's their world famous Dress to the Nines, Spend to the Fives advertisement that you would have seen throughout the mall in years past, in the 90s, right up until it closed in 2008. So that's a really neat little billboard on my layout. And in my closet, I have a special shelf where all of my locomotives are. Up here, we have my Sioux Line RS3, which is made by Lionel. It came from an exclusive Menards train set from 2010. Over here, we have the Marks 99 E7 and E7B set. Lionel's Polar Express Berkshire. No O-scale train layout is complete without the Polar Express. Down here we have my Amtrak Williams FP45, Lionel's classic 41 post-war Army switcher locomotive, a ready-made trains Chicago Northwestern Bud RDC car, Lionel FT Diesel Santa Fe number 170, MTH BNSF SW1500 switcher, MTH Protosound 1 Amtrak Genesis locomotive. And out on the layout we have my two command control locomotives made by Lionel. We have my Legacy Lionel BNSF SD70 ACE number 9380 from 2008. And closest to us we have the Lionel Lion Master Norfolk Southern SD80 Mac number 7203 from Lionel's Black Diamond Freight train set from 2005. And also on the layout right now is my very first modern O-scale locomotive from my very first train set, Lionel's Chessie System GP38 from the Chessie Diesel Freight set from 2001. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed the look at my layout, and to play us out, let's watch some trains.